Go to Middle Ages classwork, and we're going to be going over the answers in this right here. All right, we're going to be looking at the Middle Ages today. The Middle Ages is also known as the medieval period. Disorder and change after decline of the Roman Empire, because you had Germanic invaders that now occupied lands that weren't once part of the Roman Empire. It's a little bit chaotic because the Romans maintained their empire, with military force, so you have a lot of change. And this is the period known as the Middle Ages or medieval, or even the Dark Ages, if you will, because it was kind of not a good time. Not a good time. So if you look at your first question, it asks you, which Germanic tribe became the most influential in Europe during the Middle Ages? It is the Franks. The Franks. Frankish kings used their military power to expand their territory. They conquered Gaul and gave it the modern day name of France. So all you have to put for the first question is the Franks. The Franks emerge as the strongest Germanic tribe. Europe in the 6th century. 6th century is the 500s to 600. If you look at what is Gaul, this becomes the Frankish kingdom, and it's a little bit right here. You have these areas that will eventually also be taken over by the Frankish kingdom. You can see it over there on the map that we have here in class, that they eventually take that as well, parts of Italy, and then over this way into parts of modern day France and Germany up this way. You'll notice also you have Spain is the Visigoths, okay? The Vandals are down here. Vandalism, the word vandal, that's where that comes from. They tore stuff up. The Germanic tribes were pretty much like a bull in a china shop. What they didn't break, they crapped on. So a lot of the Germanic tribes were, I don't know how to say it, bad, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But important rulers, you had Clovis. You don't have to know him. He won't be on the test. You do need to know Charles Martel defeated the Spanish Muslims or Moors at the Battle of Tours in 732 and stopped Muslim expansion into Western Europe. Pepin the Short created an alliance between the Franks and the Catholic Church, and his rule was blessed by the Pope. But the one you really need to know is this guy, Charles the Great, or Charlemagne. It says, who was appointed Holy Roman Emperor on Christmas Day in 800 AD. It is this guy, Charlemagne, and whom appointed him or anointed him, the Pope. He was crowned the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire by the Pope. So he was crowned Holy Roman Emperor by the Pope. Okay. It says, what are some of his accomplishments? One accomplishment you could put, okay, is he created a strong government. And we'll talk about that in a second. So that goes in one of his accomplishments, strong central government. So what this unification, or, I guess what you would say, alliance between the church and the king, or in this case, the Holy Roman Emperor, it establishes the power of the church. And the church was really becoming powerful because, think about it, the church has a lot of what? So everybody's got to pay 10%. If you're a Roman Catholic, you got to pay 10% each week or each month to the church, which is paying your tithes. And the church had a lot of money and power. So if the Holy Roman Emperor, the Pope was kind of like, hey, I need you to go do this. And he was like, well, I don't really have the money. Here's the money. who was really in charge? Was it the Holy Roman Emperor? Probably not. More or less the Pope. Pope was really pulling the strings here of, his puppet, which was Charlemagne. There you see Charlemagne. And Charlemagne likes this idea too because, he's got the money from the church and the backing of the church in most of the things that he does. Right? This is a very important picture here. It shows the Pope crowning Charlemagne, meaning basically, hey, I'm letting you be the king. I'm letting you be the emperor. I'm in charge of this sort of thing here. If you look at Charlemagne's empire, it's the one you see here on this map. The Franks take over this area over here, a lot of what we call Germany today. And in this Treaty of Verdun, we'll look at the Kingdom of Charles and Louis the German and all these guys here. But you see, it is, sort of much larger than what the Franks originally had. It's not a huge empire by any stretch of the imagination, but for this time period, it's very important. Another one of his accomplishments, he supported education, created libraries which copied Greek and Roman manuscripts. And then with the Treaty of Verdun, he divided his land among his three grandsons, which ended the dream of a unified Europe. So once he divides, his empire, people start looking at Europe as, sort of separate, especially was his empire. Europe is not unified today. I mean, they have the European Union, which is, some countries are in it. Britain just pulled out of it. They have a common currency. It's kind of like the states in America. Each one's an independent country. But here you see where he, with the Treaty of Verdun, he splits it between what is modern day Germany and Louis the German. That's where that comes from, Germanic tribes. Lothar is down here, and then of course you have this guy in the west, which is Charles the Bald, named after bald people. They looked at him and said, well, dude's bald, we'll call him Charles the Bald. All right, other invasions. So here at the bottom you have what you're looking for. The Anglo-Saxons lived in continental Europe. They explored and settled in England. I do have some good videos on this if I can find them. The Magyars came from Central Asia and settled in modern-day Hungary. And then our favorite people, the Vikings. The Vikings came from Scandinavian countries, settled in Russia. Polytheistic farmers and fierce warriors, explorers who settled, even traveled as far as North America. So in history, you're taught who discovered the Americas. In 1492, he sailed the ocean blue. All right, you're taught Christopher Columbus, discovered what is, Latin America or Central America. And the fact of the matter is a Scandinavian named Leif Erikson, a Viking, had actually come here long before you had Christopher Columbus showing up here. And I'm going to show you a map of his exploration. But he arrives in North America, where it's a little bit like what you would consider Newfoundland, Canada, those type of places. But he does arrive in North America. His trip is a little bit weirder. When you look at it, it doesn't seem that far, and it probably isn't. But for this time period, this group of people, the Scandinavians, yeah, it's pretty far. It's pretty impressive. But he doesn't get any credit. It all goes to Christopher Columbus. One of the reasons he doesn't get a lot of credit is because he goes to these areas and he comes back. Whereas, once Spain realizes there's a whole nother continent that has gold, they're like, we're going to come to this place and take all the gold we can get. All right, everybody got that? Good. All right, here you see where the Anglo-Saxons comes from. You're going to hear the Saxons. They come from this area that is modern day Germany, and then the Angles come up here from Denmark, and they take over this area of England. We'll talk a little bit more about them when we talk about nation states. And this is interesting to me because here you have the Scandinavian countries, okay, which is like today Finland, I think Norway. And here's Leif Erikson. He comes this way and goes to Iceland, then to Greenland, and then eventually he hits North America here. It doesn't look like it's that far of a trip, but remember this water is extremely cold. The further you get north, the colder it is, but he makes this travel here, and he actually winds up in North America before Christopher Columbus, way before him. So the other one asks you, the next question is, and we're going to look at feudalism here, what happened with the language during the Middle Ages? So during the Middle Ages, Latin was what people wrote in, and so the ordinary people of this time used this right here, vernacular language, and that's the answer. So people spoke in the ordinary language called vernacular. That's all you got to really put. And vernacular differs from place to place. You think about us, and we live where? All right, but what is this place like? Where are we at? Y'all know where we're at? All right, we're in Virginia. Don't we live in Bassett? Aren't we in Bassett? Y'all live in Bassett, right? Or Henry County, right? All right, so Henry County, if you go to Michigan, New York, your vernacular or your dialect is a lot different from people up there. We're speaking the same language, but we use different terminology. For years, I would go to Michigan and people thought I was from Texas because, we have an accent. We're kind of like hillbillies, right? We're from Virginia. We're from the country, right? So you go up there. Here, if you say, I want a drink, usually a person means they want like a Dr. Pepper or Coke, right? If you go up there and you say, I want a drink, they think you're talking about a mixed drink. Okay, they don't use the same terminology. They call drinks like that pop. So do you want a pop? What kind you want? All right. Country ham and things like, even our customs are different here. If you go up there and you say, I want some country ham and a sweet tea, they're going to look at you like you're crazy because, most of the places there don't serve, country ham. And most places up there don't have sweet tea like we make it, where you melt the sugar and you do all these things. It's just cultural differences. Vernacular is the same sort of thing. If you live in one part of the country, you're going to speak the same language, but it may be a little bit different, maybe some nuance to it, okay? People in different regions have slightly different ways of speaking. So now we get to feudalism. Feudalism is a very important concept that is often real hard for people to understand. In the 900s, feudalism was a new political and social structure that emphasized safety. Under feudalism, a powerful noble granted land to a lesser noble in exchange for loyalty and military assistance. Look at your second page on there. If you scroll up, there's another page. It looks like this. And it says, what did the kings grant to the nobles? You can just put land. Okay, land. The fief is the land. Vassal receives the land. Okay, a vassal receives the land. Trade was non-existent, and warfare was often something you found in medieval times, and that's why you needed this system. Okay, it's hard to understand this because it's not a system that's very efficient. It's not a good sort of system. That's why they call, the Middle Ages the Dark Ages. So here you have feudalism, a political, economic, and social system based on loyalty military service. At the top, you have a king. Okay, look at your social structure. All right. At the top, you're going to put the king. Right beneath him, you're going to have lords, also known as vassals. All right, below that, you have your soldiers, your knight. And below them, you have your lowly serfs, S-E-R-Fs, or peasants. So the king is at the top. He gives land, what's called a fief, to the lords. The lords take some of that land, give it to the knights for protection. The peasants don't own any land, aren't given any land. They live on the manor basically for one reason: to work for the king and for safety. They stay because it's safe. And we'll look at that when we talk about the manorial system, but it's a real kind of messed up system. So peasants are there for protection. The knights protect the king, the peasants, and the lords. Now the arrow going up, okay, the arrow going up is basically protection. That's what they get. And then the arrow going down, the king gives them land. Okay, land. You know, you have to feel for peasants during this time period, because peasants, especially in the feudal system, and you look here, so you had large self-sufficient estates. You didn't have to leave the manor for any reason. Okay, you could stay there. Everything you needed was there. Your church was there. You know, the grain that they allowed you to have, you had a guy who would grind it up for you, make it into bread. All right, so serfs are peasants bound to the land, and they could not leave without permission. Another reason they didn't want to leave is because it wasn't safe. One of the best shows about medieval society is probably not a show that's appropriate for kids, but it's Game of Thrones. In Game of Thrones, you know, the peasants, if they live, you know, outside of a manor, you know, it's dangerous for them. And there's this one scene where the Hound, who is a knight, I think his name, I cannot remember his name, it's Sir something, but anyway, he's protecting a noble girl who is Arya Stark. And they come across this peasant, it's a man and his daughter. And so the man is like, well, come in, I don't have much, but what I have, you know, you're welcome to it. And he lets them stay there because they're running from the Lannisters and a group of nobility who wants to kill him. And before he leaves, the Hound looks at Arya and she's like, what are you getting ready to do? And then she realizes he's going to kill him. He's going to kill the farmer and the girl. And she goes, if you do that, I'm going to put you on. She has this list of people she's going to kill. She's like, I'm going to put you on my list. And he goes, listen, girl, if I don't do it, someone else will. So he goes in and kills them. And he takes what little they have, he takes it with them so they can survive. So being a peasant during this time period is not safe. It's dangerous. So living on the manor actually is good for them. Plus, you know, they're very poor, but they're Christians. And believe it or not, Christianity is kind of a great, I guess what you would say, thing for a poor person, because the way the serfs looked at it is, yeah, my life is pretty crummy right now, but one day I'm going to die and go where? To heaven. So it's like, hey, you know, it might be bad now, but later on I'm going to get my reward. So I might have a bad life here, but later on I'm going to be okay. You know, noble men were called lords. And, you know, if you were a peasant and one addressed you, you would say, yes, my lord. And if it was a lady, you would say, yes, my lady. Okay, a noble woman. You see this on Game of Thrones a lot. Hopefully I can show you like a scene or two that isn't too crazy. Some of the scenes are real gory. My wife likes Game of Thrones, but at the same time, you know, there's this one scene where there's this huge knight called the Mountain, Sir Gregor, and he fights the Red Viper. And the Red Viper beats him till the end. And at the end, he's kind of gloating and insulting him. And he grabs his legs and he pulls him down and he takes his hand and he starts squeezing his head and the dude's head explodes in his hand. And so my wife's like, oh my gosh. But back then, that's, you fought hand to hand and it was kind of bloody and gory. Medieval manor, that's what it looks like. If you'll notice, there's some things you got to see that's important to peasants. So peasants are in charge of the orchard, but they don't get any of the fruit or whatever is produced here. Here's your fields where the peasants would work the fields. They would get a very little of that, and even when they got it, they would have to take it up here and pay someone to grind their grain and make it into like bread. You see the forest up here, and a lot of this is for protection, but this is where the king and his nobles would hunt. No peasants were allowed to hunt. Peasants rarely ever ate meat. Rarely had meat to eat, but here you see the church, which was really important to them, and then the priest lived right here in the parsonage, but everything they needed was right here, so they never left. And if the land was sold or taken over by someone else, then the peasants, they now would have to stay with whoever owned. So they had to stay, they were bound to the land. They had to stay there. Life on the medieval manor. Here you see the serfs at work. There you see the castle in the background, and you see the serfs working and tilling the land. One of the things that I find interesting is the castle, because most people look at a castle, like my wife included, but there are very few, there's hardly anything that looks like a castle in America, but castles were not built for like luxury. They were basically built for defense. And some of the first ones were made out of wood, but a wood castle isn't very efficient. Why? All right, what can you do to a wood castle? It's like the story of the three little pigs. You can just burn it. That doesn't really help you out there. So they started to make them out of stone. And when you even look at castles, like you look at this one, you can tell that it looks nice, or here's a better example. See, that looks awesome, right? But think about living there. I mean, there's no electricity. They cooked your food in one part of the castle, and then when they walked it up, by the time it got there, it'd be what? Cold, drafty, probably real hot, and kind of, you know how it is, like the cinder block walls. If you don't have heat or air, it's either going to be real hot and kind of, stifling in there, or it's going to be really what? Cold. So it's not really built for, I guess what you would say, pleasure, or how do you say it, comfort. It's really more built for protection. And there you see the parts of the castle. The most important part is here. This is the drawbridge. So you got this area right here. A guy can come here, but if they don't want him to come over here, they won't lower the bridge down. Lots of protection here. Okay, this is really an important part. We're going to watch a couple of videos that tell you about the moat. The moat was filled with duty. And in a lot of cases, they didn't want you to deter you from coming across that moat. So they pooped in it and they did all kinds of stuff, had the weird animals and fish in there. But once again, this is built for protection more than anything. None of my videos work. I have to go back to them. But all right, and then we get to the knights. I always find the knights fascinating because the knights were mounted warriors. So you start off as a page when you're young, about the age of 7, and you learn manners and you learn weapons, manners being important to nobility. When you are 14, you become a squire and you assist the knight. There's this one great, in Game of Thrones, there's a female knight. And she has a page. In that page, she's kind of like teaching him how to be a knight. Now, he's a grown man. It's weirder in there. And there's no women nights, by the way, during medieval times. But anyway, it's a great story in general. But, you know, you can see she's teaching him how to be a knight and all the things that go with it. Like, she's very honorable. She fights in fair fights. She actually fights the hound and almost kills him. And Aya leaves him to die because she's mad that he killed the two people. But one of the main things they're taught, especially after they become a knight and prove themselves in battle, okay? Another one of the best scenes. So she technically couldn't be a knight because she's a woman, but at the end, one of the Lannisters made her a knight. So what they do is they take a sword and then they put it on. They start on your left and then over your right, and they say, "I dub thee knight," and then you become a knight, right? Because she showed that she was brave in battle. But they teach a code of chivalry, and chivalry is a code of conduct. Think about this, and you ladies, you know, today you've got it kind of bad because of social media and stuff like that. You know, men aren't as chivalrous as they used to be, you know, holding the door open for a lady. Back in the day, when you went on a date, the guy would open the car door for the lady, you know, bring her flowers, bring her parents flowers. You know, this is something that is taught to knights. You fight fairly. You don't stab someone in the back. You're loyal. You're loyal to your nobility. You're loyal to the king. You're courteous to women. Back then, if a woman was about to walk over a mud puddle, they would take their cape off, lay it in the mud, and the woman would walk across that. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, couldn't they just walk around? But that was to prove, you know, hey, I'm chivalrous. I respect women, courteous to women. All right, and you know, most of them were very courageous. They didn't, you know, turn down a fight. They would fight. You know, in these cases, you see, how did they practice? They went to tournaments, which were mock battles, like jousting. There's also a great scene where they have one of these tournaments, and the hound gets mad at his brother, who is the mountain. And maybe I can pull that one up. I don't know. Some of it's got some crazy language, so I don't know if we can watch it. But chivalry is that code of honor and behavior, treating women with respect. And then finally, we get to the medieval church. The medieval church, Roman Catholic Church, grew in importance after the authority of Western Roman Empire declined. It becomes the unifying force in Western Europe. And that's really the main thing you got to know about the church. So the church hierarchy, if you look here, and the way I look at this is almost like a Walmart. If you look at Walmart, it's a very similar structure. So the priest is the guy you go to. He's your local person, like your local church. There's your priest. That's who helps you out, right? That's the guy you see more than anybody. He's probably the most important person in this, you know, sort of chain to the individual people that go to church. All right. So then you have a person that's above him called a bishop. The bishop is in charge of maybe 5 to 10 churches. He goes and makes sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing and make sure things are on the up and up or whatever. He also gets the money to make sure that they're turning in, you know, whatever money they should turn in to the Roman Catholic Church. Above him, probably in charge of like 20 churches, or 25 churches, or a large number, would be your archbishop. See, this would be like your store manager at Walmart, and then this is your district manager, and then this is your regional manager. Okay? He's in charge of more stores. He's in charge of more churches. And then finally you get to the Pope, which is like the CEO. He's in charge of it all. He's the head guy. He's your CEO. He's in charge of every church in the world. All right, so church hierarchy, parish church led by a priest. Parish priests serve the religious and social needs of the people. Probably the most important person to the, you know, I guess the local people is your church priest. All right. A diocese is a church area led by a bishop and a group of parishes, and the archdiocese is a church area led by an archbishop, which are a group of dioceses. It's broken down like you would see stores, you know. They got a regional manager, they got a district manager. And that's what the church would look like there. The church used a lot of power. One of the main things they used was excommunication against people who defied the church or its rules. Excommunication was a really bad thing because you got kicked out of the church. Excommunication, you're expelled, no sacraments or burial, and you are removed from society. Used against heretics or people who defied church beliefs. So let's say that you were deemed a heretic. If you were like, I don't believe in God, well, they were like, bet, you're going to become a heretic, and we're going to torture you until you say you are a Christian. Or if you don't want to do that, we're just going to burn you to a stake for being a heretic. So there was a lot of fear. And another thing, if you think about it, if you got kicked out of the church, a lot of people who were Christians felt like you were automatically going to go to hell. It was like, I get kicked out of the church, go straight to hell, just like go straight to jail on Monopoly. A lot of people were scared of this, and so they really fell in line with the Roman Catholic Church. So it was a way for the church to use their power. You had to pay 10% of your, income to the church, which is compared to like Islam or whatever, it's kind of high. Islam is 2.5%, but don't worry about these other things up here, but just look at this Inquisition. So if you were a heretic or accused of heresy, they would hunt you down. If you confessed, you received punishment, but if not, you were burned at the stake. So one of the more famous people burned at the stake we're going to talk about in the next section, which is Joan of Arc. Joan of Arc was a peasant girl who led France in the 100 Years' War, and eventually the French won. And she was captured by England, and they told her, she said that she heard God speak to her, okay? And so they claimed she was a heretic, and they told her to recant and say she didn't hear God speak to her. And she refused because she was like, I really do hear him speak to me. And they burned her at the stake. So, burning a person at the stake is a horrible way to kind of go anyway. Missionaries spread Christianity and the Latin alphabet throughout Europe. If you think about St. Patrick's Day, it is really after this guy, St. Patrick, not just a day for people to drink green beer and get drunk and puke on each other. Then St. Augustine in England. There you have St. Patrick. For whatever reason, I don't know how. I mean, if you go back, this is Ireland, so this is the big Irish holiday. Clergy, monks, or men who devoted their lives to God, lived in monastery. Nuns were women who devoted their lives to God, lived in a convent. Both groups used fasting, prayer, and poverty as characteristics of their daily life. They built schools and hospitals to help the needy. Monasteries preserved Greco-Roman culture by copying Greek and Roman manuscripts. I find monks and nuns fascinating because they pretty much give up their lives for Christianity and for God. And basically, they live like monks you would find, like Buddhist monks, probably about the same. I look at this right here, and it's like, it's amazing to me. This is the medieval monk's day. So about 8:30, they go to bed. They get up about 2:30 or, about 2:30 a.m. and they start their day. So they start with meditation, and then they go to church for a church service. Take a little nap here, 30-minute nap, back to a church service. Then they meditate and read, back to a church service, meditate and read, church service. Then they go to work. That sounds like a hoot, right? All right. Then they go here, which is another church service. Now, this is summer. This is in the summertime. They finally eat. All right. They eat at what time? 1 o'clock. All right. So they've been up pretty much the whole from almost about 8 or 9 hours when they eat. Then they take another nap. Then they get up for a church service. Then they work. Then they eat dinner. And not a lot of time for eating there. And then another church service. Then they meditate, and then a last church service. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 church services, right? That sounds like a blast, don't it? That's wild. You look at this one, it's very different because it's winter. So they go to bed early, you know, the sun goes down earlier, so probably about 6:30 here. And they wake up again at about, I guess, 3:30ish in the morning. Back to meditating, church service, meditating, church service, meditating, church service. Then they go to work here. And then they do a church service. Then they eat one meal a day, one meal. Then they work again, and then they, you know, pretty much church service today. And this one they get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 church services, and they work most of the day. So yeah, that's dedication right there. That's definitely not for me. Illuminated manuscripts are these beautiful sort of, you know, huge. They have to be huge books that have pictures, and then they have, you know, writing, but the pictures really show you what the story they're trying to tell. Many of the Bibles back in this time period used illuminated manuscripts, very fancy type of you know, literature. All right, so let's look at a couple of videos. Did I have anybody join me? I hear people on there. Who do I have? Oh, I got a group of people. Charity, Dylan, and Vanessa. For whatever reason, I hope y'all came in earlier and got everything. Did you get everything?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did not get everything.